Timmy is an average kid that no one understands, except for his pink and green inanimate objects that he talks to like a psycho. If you watched Nickelodeon at all during the early 2000s, the Fairly OddParents was guaranteed to be on your TV at some point. The show follows Timmy Turner, a 10-year-old kid who leads a pretty miserable life, but is also granted a pair of fairy godparents who have the power to grant his every wish, provided it fits within the rules. But in a world of fairy magic, who are the most noble and who are truly evil? Hey guys, I'm Brad with WickedBinge, and this is the Fairly OddParents, good to evil.
You tricked me to teach me a lesson? Awesome!
Before we begin, we've got our own set of rules. It's generally accepted that this show suffered from a severe case of seasonal rot, much like SpongeBob and The Simpsons. In the later seasons, the creators would add more and more characters in an effort to keep the show fresh, but with poor results. They would also forget about each and every rule of the show, making characters chaotic and difficult to judge. For these reasons, we're only going to be counting episodes up to the season 6 finale, Wishology, to maintain balance within the list. Yes, that means we're not counting Chloe and Sparky. And just like the previous list on Jimmy Neutron, we won't be counting any of the Jimmy Timmy Power Hour episodes, or the live-action movies with Drake Bell, because come on now, come on. As usual, we'll be starting with the most pure and noble characters and working our way down. These characters are the good. Who better to give the gold medal of good to than the Crimson Chin? Okay, yes, he normally doesn't have a real-world impact on the town of Dimsdale, but through the power of fairy magic, the comic book universe is just as real as any other.
Time to eat chin, fellas!
He doesn't get that heroic of an entrance in his first episode, thanks to Timmy letting him know that the Chin is just a fictional character drawn for others' entertainment. This sends the Chin into a deep depression, as he refuses to fight crime and spends the entire next issue in the fetal position. But in fairness, we would all probably have an existential crisis if we found out that we were fictional characters. Timmy tries to bring him out of his funk in order to save the city from villains like the Bronze Kneecap by becoming Cleft, the boy Chin Wonder, and he only succeeds after he's put in danger. Thankfully, the Chin realizes that although he's fictional, he's real to everyone inside the comic who needs him. From that point on, the Crimson Chin returns to fighting all sorts of evil and crime and protecting the city of Cincinnati. And he sometimes tackles threats in the real world when Timmy gets a bit irresponsible with his wishes. Though he is terrible when it comes to managing his love life, that's the rule for pretty much everyone in this show.
Are you nuts? I could never marry a guy who throws kids off buildings.
In the end, the Chin embodies the values of truth, justice, and heroism more than anyone else, so we have to give him the top spot on our list. The silver medal of good goes to teen singing sensation Chip Skylark. When he first appears, he comes to do a show in Dimsdale on Timmy's birthday, which causes everyone in town to forget Timmy even exists as they run screaming to the concert. Timmy decides to take his frustration out on Chip himself and wishes for the worst possible non-lethal thing to happen to Chip, which of course is spending a night as Vicky's prisoner. He's surprisingly optimistic about the whole situation.
Another day, another wackadoo holding me against my will.
Once Timmy finally confronts him, Chip ends up being just about the nicest guy on the planet. He's sad that his concert caused everyone to forget Timmy's birthday, and even gifts him an unreleased Crash Nebula action figure as a peace offering, stating that it was Chip's birthday too. Timmy realizes that Chip wasn't the stuck-up, self-obsessed jerk that he thought he was, and helps to free him from Vicky by exposing the fact that he's not all that rich.
You broke loser creep! I don't love you!
Timmy then wishes Chip over to the concert just in time to stop the raging fangirls, and Timmy's dad, from rioting. Chip loves his fans so much that he literally gets sick at the thought of disappointing them, and he's about the nicest and most generous guy ever, even though he's aware that he's the biggest teenage star in the world. Honestly, that might be one of the most unrealistic things in the whole show. Regardless, Chip's definitely worthy of the second place spot on the list. And come on, who doesn't love my shiny teeth and me? In third place is Dimsdale's mascot, Chompy the Goat. He's something of a folk hero in town, being credited for several acts of heroism, like inventing the cure for polio. That stuff probably didn't happen, but Chompy's still regarded as a stand-up goat by many. Unfortunately, the town has kept him in awful living conditions, so Timmy wishes for him to be free from his captivity. This goes wrong when the townspeople then riot over the loss of their beloved hero. So, Timmy tries to bring him back to prevent further damage, but when he finally finds Chompy, he's already started a brand new life with a wife and kids. Timmy realizes that he can't force Chompy to leave his family and go back to his cage, so he decides to admit to releasing Chompy after the town has already hailed Timmy as a hero. The mayor and the rest of the town admire Timmy's honesty, but immediately turn on him, cornering him in an alleyway until Chompy rescues him from the raging townsfolk. He may not have cured polio, but he certainly saved Timmy's life and continues to inspire people across Dimsdale. That certainly makes him a hero in my book.
3 cheers for Chompy and Timmy!
We might as well place all of Timmy's fairies in one entry. So up next are Poof, Wanda, and Cosmo, ranked in that order. Cosmo and Wanda have wildly differing personalities, as they fall into the usual dim-witted husband and nagging wife. Cosmo often says and does really random, stupid, and irresponsible things, sometimes with drastic consequences.
I always was the worst child at the Fairy Academy.
He's responsible for sinking Atlantis 9 times. He turned his own father into a fly, and he's done things that aren't even supposed to be possible within the laws of magic, like pooping away Wanda's wand. With that kind of raw magical power, he has the potential to wreak some ridiculous amounts of havoc. Luckily, he has a loving wife to keep him in check, most of the time, because Wanda comes with her own set of flaws. She can be very arrogant and overbearing of both Cosmo and Timmy, and she often berates her husband for his low intelligence, even when he hasn't done anything dumb.
Look, I'm getting jiggly with it. Ready to lose this?
Still, she's the more responsible one and usually has the foresight to warn Timmy about the possible dangers of his wishes. But in the end, the two of them are required to do what he asks, as long as it doesn't break the rules. Even then, they usually try to find loopholes in order to grant Timmy's more reckless wishes. But this is all done out of love for their godson, who doesn't really get much love from his real parents. So it's good that Cosmo and Wanda can fill that role. Eventually, the two of them become actual parents when Timmy wishes for a fairy baby to be born, and Cosmo, not Wanda, becomes pregnant with their son.
I'll call it Bartholomew.
After about an hour's worth of shenanigans and evil plots to kidnap him, the family finally brings home baby Poof. He's just a baby, so he has trouble granting wishes on his own or doing anything besides putting himself into comical amounts of danger, but Timmy tries his best to be a good godbrother. Even with the name-calling and the recklessness and the destructive tendencies, the Cosmo family is a tight-knit group of loving fairies who do their best to keep Timmy happy and safe. Next up is going to be Timmy's friends, Chester and AJ. We'll go ahead and group them together since they're almost always on screen together. The two come from very different upbringings, as Chester is a poor child being raised by a single father in a trailer park, while AJ is a super genius who lives in a mansion. AJ tends to brag about his intelligence, which makes him appear very arrogant. But he sort of gets over this when he apologizes for always gloating over getting better grades than Timmy rather than helping him study. Chester, on the other hand, doesn't have a whole lot to brag about, as his dad is considered to be the worst professional baseball player in history, which I guess is where the name McBadBad comes in.
My dad has to hide his face in shame.
Chester's biggest problem is usually his lack of common sense, which gets him and his friends into very dangerous situations. Their friendship with each other is pretty strong, and they have a good bond with Timmy too, but there are times when their relationship gets strained. Some of the time, this is Timmy's fault, like when he leaves them behind to go chase after Trixie Tang, and other times, Chester and AJ start fights all on their own, like when the two of them bicker over which superhero is better, Crimson Shen or Crash Nebula.
And if you're not there, you're not my friend anymore.
But most of the time, the three of them are very good friends, like when the kids work together to help Timmy beat Vicky in a skateboarding contest. Next is the infamous TV superhero, Catman. Played by the late great Adam West, Catman is a little bit unhinged, and by that I mean he's probably suffering from a mental condition, to the point that he has to have nurses subdue him with tranquilizers to stop him from causing too much damage. He may have only played the hero on TV, but Adam West still thinks he and Catman are one and the same, and he still fights for justice like a real superhero should.
Timmy, what'll I do all day if I can't fight crime?
He rescues Timmy from Vicky's clutches twice and stops her from cheating to win the Miss Dimsdale pageant. and he even becomes one of Timmy's legal guardians to protect him from truancy. He develops a rivalry with the Crimson Chin when Timmy wishes him to be put in a place where he can fight crime without hurting anyone, which of course is the comic book universe. But the two of them eventually resolve their differences when they team up to defeat Dogzilla. All in all, Catman is a menace who has good intentions, but he also does have a few moments of heroism, so he gets a spot in the low end of the good tier. And last on the list of good is Timmy Turner. Looking at his life from an outside perspective, Timmy really doesn't have it that great. His parents are almost never around, and they're neglectful even when they are. He's often left with his evil babysitter. He has an insane teacher with a vendetta against him, and he even has his very own stalker. The fact that he's been given fairies pretty much speaks to how miserable his life is, which builds our sympathy for him. However, most of the things he wishes for are selfish, dangerous, and don't have much thought put into them. The formula of most episodes usually goes like this. Timmy makes a wish, the wish backfires. Cosmo and Wanda are prevented from immediately unwishing the wish for some reason to create suspense, and then Timmy finds some clever way to reset everything back to normal. There are a few times where Timmy wishes for something selfless, like when he wishes for Chester to be the greatest baseball player of all time, which backfires when the fame goes to Chester's head.
Just because you're a great player doesn't mean you have to become a lousy friend.
Most of the time, Timmy only uses magic to benefit himself. Normally, he learns his lesson by the end of the episode, but it's usually only after putting himself, his friends, his family, his fairies, Dimsdale, and at times, the entire world in danger. Granted, not every bad thing that happens in the show is his fault, and sometimes he helps save the town from threats not caused by his own carelessness or ambitions, such as when he stops the darkness by turning into the kindness.
You turn the darkness into the kindness!
Based on all that, we're still gonna call Timmy a good kid, despite his many faults, though he just barely escapes the gray area. That's it for the good characters. Now it's time to descend into neutral territory. This is the gray area. Sheldon Dinkelberg is going to kick off the neutral characters. He's the next-door neighbor, sworn enemy, and scapegoat of all of Mr. Turner's problems, despite actually being very friendly on the outside. Timmy's dad hates him for being more successful at work and having nicer things in the Turner family, which reflects worse on him than it does on Dinkelberg. However, Dinkelberg does kind of give off a passive-aggressive vibe, like he's secretly rubbing all of his success in Turner's face.
Just don't tell your dad I'm not evil. It would break his heart.
Even if that's true, that would just make him kind of a jerk, not really a villain. Next is the most popular girl in school, Trixie Tang. Most of the time, she's a typical rich, spoiled, stuck-up jerk alongside the other popular kids at school. Timmy has a massive crush on her, but he's never able to win her over due to being part of the unpopular underclass. We do get a couple of episodes in which we see a bit more of her actual character, the first of which is when Timmy wishes himself to be popular.
May I grace you with my presence?
This gains the attention of all the popular kids at school, but at the expense of his friends. And by the end of the episode, Timmy realizes his mistakes and apologizes to his friends and his godparents. Trixie then tells Timmy that she admires him sticking up for his friend, but also says she can never be caught hanging out with the unpopular crowd.
I think it was really sweet the way you stood up for your friends.
Unfortunately, in another episode, stuff got worse for Trixie. When Timmy wishes that he and Trixie were the only people in the world, we learn that Trixie is an attention junkie as she begins to go insane due to lack of admiration from anyone else but Timmy.
I need somebody to adore me!
Due to her vanity and how badly she treats everyone who isn't considered popular, she's got to be placed in the gray area. Channel 7's reporter, Chet You Betcha, is up next. Anytime something significant happens, Chet pops up on a conveniently nearby TV to explain the strange occurrence, usually caused by Timmy. He has a high opinion of himself, probably to compensate for his height, but other than that, I can't really think of anything to dock him for. He's just your average, everyday news reporter, which is about as neutral as it gets.
It's Christmas, and I'm Chet You Betcha.
Now we have a character who got more and more forgotten as the show went on. Vicky's little sister, Tootie. Alright, let's get the bad stuff out of the way first. Tootie is a straight-up stalker.
Why doesn't he like me?
She's constantly trying to butt into Timmy's life. She has dolls and shrines dedicated to him, and she's even invented gadgets and devices to spy on him. She's an obsessed creep when it comes to her crush on him. even though Timmy's kinda still in that stage of life where girls have cooties, so he usually treats her pretty badly. However, once he realizes that Tootie has to deal with Vicky on a daily basis, he has a lot more sympathy for her. He starts to be nicer, while still trying to stay out of kissing distance, and he even does stuff like lending her Cosmo and Wanda for a day, even though she has to have her memory erased at the end. It's strange that she doesn't have her own fairies, considering how miserable she is, but she probably would just end up using them to spy on Timmy anyway, so. Without a doubt, her best moment is when she exposes Vicky's evil deeds to Mr. and Mrs. Turner.
I think she's icky. Icky. With a V.
Which would have gotten her fired if Timmy didn't choose to reset the timeline. Tootie really needs to let up on the stalking, but I don't see too much bad in her. She earns a spot in the high gray area. Next is a bit of a strange entry. It's Mark Chang, teenage prince of Yugopotamia. His home planet is the exact opposite of Earth, a place where they revel in all things nasty, mean, and unpleasant, and everything cute and fun is considered dangerous and deadly, including flowers, hugs, and chocolate. Mark makes his first visit to Earth when Timmy wishes for a real alien to attack his house, as part of a game with Chester and AJ. So, Cosmo and Wanda poof Mark in from the other side of the galaxy.
Puny humans! What's up?
As his species loves nasty and evil things, he immediately falls for Vicky and tries to impress her so she'll date him. This involves sucking the brains out of Chester and AJ, who think that Mark is just an animatronic, and Timmy takes issue with this. So he brings the king and queen over to bring Mark home. Mark and Timmy also have a duel to the death, which Timmy ends up winning, but decides to spare his opponent's life. Timmy and Mark's relationship improves after Timmy helps Mark to defeat his enemies, the Giggle Pies, and to escape from his evil arranged bride, Princess Mandai, after which Mark decides to settle down on Earth to live a normal life. I'm sort of willing to forgive his brain-sucking, death-dueling, planet-destroying tendencies because it really isn't his choice to do any of those things. It's a result of his biology, and he does care for Timmy, his royal parents, and Vicky, unfortunately. Next up is the mayor of Dimsdale. Dimsdale apparently has no term limits because the mayor has been running the town since the 70s. Unlike the town mascot, Chompy, whom the mayor kept in awful conditions, the mayor is anything but a hero. He's incompetent, easily bribed and blackmailed, and sometimes just a dictator. Vicky always inexplicably manages to have some sort of dirt on him, forcing him to do as she wishes.
Those clothes were in style back then!
He gets temporarily chased out of office when Vicky exposes to Chompy that the mayor enjoys eating goat meat, leaving the position open for her to seize power, judging by the action she takes as the new leader, like enslaving the entire population with ape soldiers. The mayor holds way more power than he has a right to. If this mayor was as evil as someone like Vicky, the consequences would be disastrous for Dimsdale. The only thing that really keeps him this high up is the fact that he's kept the town from burning itself down for many decades. Cosmo's mother, Mama Cosma, is next. She's overprotective and constantly treats Cosmo like a child. It's not like he acts his age anyway, but she certainly isn't helping matters. For some unexplained reason, she can't stand Wanda and hates that Cosmo married her or loves her at all. From her first appearance, she tries to break the two of them up by any means necessary. That takes the petty mother-in-law trope to a level not usually seen in a kid's cartoon. She does eventually soften up, especially after Poof is born, but she still doesn't support her son's marriage for no apparent reason. I suppose it's all out of love for Cosmo, but she could stand to be a lot less overbearing. We gotta give a mention to Doug Dimmadome, owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadome. This guy's only allegiance is to his wallet, and his morality shifts dramatically from episode to episode. Sometimes he's a big help to Timmy and to Dimsdale, and other times he's a maniac who tries to hypnotize the whole town with mind-controlling milk in order to make a profit. And that's not even a joke, by the way, that really happened.
More mind control, and more mind control means more money!
After Timmy inadvertently reunites Doug with his long-lost son, Doug helps Timmy and his friends find a way to see Crash Nebula on ice without tickets, but rarely does Doug do anything nice for other people unless he knows he can make money out of it. We're gonna place him in lower-tier neutral territory for some of his more villainous schemes, but we're also going to acknowledge that he's not all bad. It's a similar story with the buffest fairy of them all, Jorgen von Strangel. In many of his earlier appearances, he's an antagonist. He tries on many occasions to get Timmy's fairies taken away for no real reason, other than the fact that he likes to see people being miserable. He physically abuses nearly everyone he comes across, but his assistant Binky gets the worst of it. Granted, sometimes Jorgen is in the right. In his very first appearance, he tries to prosecute Timmy for making selfish wishes and never even taking the time to say thank you to Cosmo and Wanda. But it's the repeated attempts to separate them that really drags Jorgen down.
Tiny, ungrateful Earth boy!
Normally, though, Jorgen is a mighty defender of Fairy World, protecting it from all threats, including anti-fairies, pixies, and even the darkness and its eliminators. Jorgen at least takes pride in his job, as well as his physique. Alright, maybe too much time on his physique. And just escaping the bad territory are Mr. and Mrs. Turner. Talk about awful and incompetent. When dealing with their son, the Turners are neglectful, cruel, and just plain old stupid.
Can I have some of that salt you're whispering to?
They forget his name, they talk about how much better life would be for them if they never had a son, and they're always pawning him off on a maniac of a babysitter. They never listen to anything he has to say, including his pleas to get rid of Vicky in various episodes, and when he tells them that he's not a shoplifter.
But I didn't do it!
When Timmy actually does act up, they rarely know how to properly punish him and often end up going too far or not far enough. The reason Timmy even has fairies is because his parents constantly lie to him and leave him with Vicky, among other reasons. Finding a positive quality between these two is like looking for a needle in a haystack, but I suppose I can scrounge up a couple of reasons to keep them out of the bad territory. The two of them are hard workers, as they complain a lot about how stressed they are, but the house is usually in good condition, thanks to Mrs. Turner, and the family isn't poor, thanks to Mr. Turner. After realizing how poorly they treated their son, and just how awful Vicky is, they do their best to find him by tricking Doug Dimmadome and hijacking all the TV stations to put the message out there that they love him and want him to come home. Definitely one of their better moments. They also help Timmy to defeat Crocker after realizing how often they lie to him and how much they really love him. Hey, but don't let that fool you though. They think their life would have been better without a son, and they are constantly reminding him of that, whether directly or indirectly.
Think how great our lives would be if we didn't have Timmy!
That wraps up the gray area. We're now entering the bad territory, where all the villains, lunatics, and massive jerks reside. These characters are the bad to evil. First up is the school bully Francis. Nobody's safe from this big gray beast. He spends the school day dealing out wedgies, beatings, and swirlies to all the smaller, less popular kids.
Turner? Is it beating time already?
He has a ridiculous amount of bullying tools at his disposal, and he's also a black belt in Kung Fu, so not many people have a fighting chance against him. For whatever reason, many authority figures sees Francis as a good, responsible, upstanding citizen, as shown when Francis is obviously shoplifting, but manages to blame it on Timmy. Francis has got few redeeming qualities, and the only reason that he isn't lower is because other villains are even worse. Next is the duo, Remy Bucksaplenty and his fairy, Juandissimo. These two are bad for very different reasons, and for the record, Juandissimo is worse without a doubt, but we'll talk about Remy first. Remy is a spoiled rich kid who's snobby, arrogant, and generally just a jerk to everyone below his social class. Timmy Turner most of all. In reality, Remy is jealous that Timmy, allegedly, has parents that love him and godparents that spend time with him, while Remy's parents are always too busy to give him any attention whatsoever, making him miserable.
Why should you get real parents and godparents that love you?
I guess the writers forgot the reason Timmy has fairies in the first place, because the two are pretty much in the same boat. But that doesn't stop Remy from trying to get rid of Cosmo and Wanda, so that Timmy will never see them again. He tries this multiple times, and is thwarted each time usually just by dumb luck. Remy and Juandissimo are separated for some time after Remy loses the magical duel and forgets he ever had a fairy, but Juandissimo covertly tries to reunite with them. This only succeeds thanks to an elaborate plan by Jorgen, but that's not important right now. The main point is that Remy has a vendetta for Timmy that spawns purely out of jealousy, but that really doesn't compare to the actions of Juandissimo. He is without a doubt the Pepe Le Pew of the Fairly OddParents, constantly chasing after Wanda, a married woman who left him over 10,000 years ago. Like, move on! He's also too self-obsessed and is rarely able to keep his shirt on in any given situation. I suppose I can give him some credit for taking charge when Jorgen isn't around and helping to scare off the darkness, but most of the time, he's just kind of a snake. Next is the creepy dentist, Dr. Bender, and his son, Wendell. Bender is notorious for stealing the neighborhood kids' objects that land in his yard, which Timmy learns the hard way. Bender bases his superiority solely on his perfect teeth, the irony being that his teeth aren't even real and are actually dentures.
My dentures! Give me back my perfect teeth!
In one episode, he steals Chip Skylark's perfect teeth right out of his mouth as he's sleeping, which almost ruins his singing career. He also enjoys causing pain for the kids whose teeth he rips out, so we can slap a sadism charge on here too. Wendell is basically a clone of his father, so there's not much to say about him. There are definitely worse villains out there, but these two really need to chill out and keep their hands off of other people's teeth. We're gonna count all the Crimson Chin's villains in one entry, all represented by the Bronze Kneecap, H2 Olga, and the Negachin. The Kneecap is a bank robber with tons of gadgets locked away in his pantella, but he appears more than any other villain in Cincinnati. H2 Olga's main goal is to drown the entire city in water, but she never really gets too far since she can't do much without a nearby body of water. The biggest threat to come out of the Chin comics is Negachin, an evil, alternate dimension Crimson Chin.
Time for my evil laugh.
Apparently, whenever he's around, people come down with a case of Sonic Adventure 2 syndrome and mistake him for the real Crimson Chin, despite his costume having completely different shapes and colors. What sets him apart from most other villains is that he's actually competent and comes very close to succeeding, like in the episode The Big Superhero Wish. But Timmy reminds him that as long as the Crimson Chin's writers want him to win, evil will never triumph. Now we have the most obvious parody character in the show, Dark Laser. Now if you don't get the reference, clearly you've been living under a rock. Timmy brings him to life with a magic copier, and true to his nature, he immediately creates an army to try and take over the world.
My victory is assured.
With his Death Star ripoff, he tries to blow up the Earth just to spite Timmy Turner. He also tried to bring Timmy over to the dark side, showing that he at least has some respect for his adversary. But trying to corrupt a 10-year-old is horrific. To his credit, and to the credit of a couple of other entries further down, he teams up with Timmy to defeat the darkness and its eliminators, but only on the condition that he can destroy Timmy once the fight is over. I know this spot probably seems a bit low for someone whose goal is the destruction of free worlds and the creation of a galactic empire, but it's the relentlessness and specific cruelty of the next few entries that make them worse. In 5th place, we have Norm the Genie. Norm makes a living screwing over other people. Everyone who rubs his lamp can expect their 3 wishes to bring them pain, misfortune, and misery, all because Norm gets his kicks by tricking people. Granted, some of the blame goes to the selfish or stupid people who make these wishes, but Norm readily admits that his main goal is to mess with people in order to free himself from the lamp. I suppose I'd be miffed if I was completely tethered to a lamp for my entire existence, but that's no reason to ruin the lives of innocent people, specifically Timmy Turner.
And watch his evil plan unfold.
He tries to separate Timmy and his fairies on several occasions, sometimes to free himself, and other times just to see Timmy miserable. He even tried to use Timmy's best friend Chester against him. Fortunately, these plans are always foiled thanks to Norm's overconfidence. Next up are Fairy World's biggest rivals, the Pixies, namely HP and Sanderson. These creatures are industrialized and business-oriented. With the exception of HP, they all have the same appearance and speak in the same monotone voice.
Could we hurry this up? I've got a rave to get to.
Their main goal is to take over Earth and Fairy World in order to make them as dull, boring, and unfun as the Pixies are. Somehow, they manage to buy out Fairy World. Not really sure how that works, but Timmy manages to defeat them by beating HP at minigolf. Along with the anti-fairies, the Pixies try to kidnap the new fairy baby to harness its power for evil. In a cartoon setting, the worst thing anyone could possibly do is suck out all the fun from the world. So the Pixies definitely earn their placement with the most despicable characters. Next up is the other magical species, the anti-fairies, led by Auntie Cosmo and Auntie Wanda. These guys are the opposite of fairies, as well as the Pixies in a way. They are chaotic, and their main desire is to cause mischief.
I'm incredible!
Every year on Friday the 13th, they escape from prison in Fairy World to cause bad luck on Earth, which ranges from breaking mothers' backs to causing mass property damage. Their personalities are the reverse of their fairy counterparts, so Auntie Cosmo is an evil British genius. Auntie Cosmo is the one to come up with a plan to kidnap Poof to use him for universal domination, which of course means the destruction of Fairy World and all the forces of good in existence.
Oh, let's just suck the magic out of this brat and move on, okay?
It's amazing that these guys are only in third place considering their motivations, but I firmly believe that the second and first place entries are well deserved. It's a toss-up between these next two, but in second place we have Denzel Crocker. Crocker clearly has some issues, as we can see by his outburst whenever he thinks about fairy godparents!
Why don't any of the things I wish for ever become reality?
He loves to give kids failing grades, even if they do the assignment correctly, and I seriously doubt his qualifications to be a teacher. His worst appearance is when he obtains Timmy's magic rule-free muffin and makes himself the supreme ruler of the universe, enslaving everyone in existence and forcing them to worship Crocker. I suppose we should address a time when Crocker was a kind and altruistic kid who used his fairies for good until Cosmo let the secret out in front of the whole town and gets Crocker's memory erased as Cosmo and Wanda are reassigned. Thanks to magic time travel, Timmy discovers this and accidentally causes this to happen, though it would have happened anyway, so it's not Timmy's fault. Since then, Denzel Crocker roams Dimsdale in search of the fairies he's lost, but instead of wanting to use them for good again, he wants to use them to seize power and to make people miserable. To his credit, he is right about the existence of fairies, but even if everyone believed him, he still wouldn't be any more sympathetic or any less evil. In the end, we had to go with a character who has a black hole where her heart should be. The gold medal of evil goes to Vicky. There's no question that she's the most cruel and heartless character in the entire show. She likes to mentally and physically abuse kids with no rhyme or reason, and she takes advantage of parents to make more and more money for her babysitting service.
Twerp! Get out here!
There have been a few times when Timmy tries to get Vicky to change, like when he wishes her to be nice, but she has so much malice and darkness within her that it has to take other forms once it leaves Vicky. We get to see her at her lowest point when she tortured Timmy at a snow resort, while his dad tried to save his wife from an abominable snowman. The two end up trapped in a cave, and Cosmo and Wanda are frozen, so they can't use magic to get out. Timmy declares that Vicky's getting what she deserves, and that he doesn't care if he dies, so long as she goes down too.
Then if I go down, at least you're going down with me!
Oh, that's pretty dark for this show. Regardless, the two of them team up to escape the cave and the abominable snowman, but the monster turns out to be a sexy pizza delivery guy. Vicky gets upset at Timmy for rescuing her from a hot guy, and we get a complete reset to the status quo, because of course we do. Vicky's certainly one of the reasons that Timmy has Cosmo and Wanda in the first place. This makes her a sort of necessary evil for the show, but that also means that she's pretty much the biggest source of evil in the entire world. She's greedy, sadistic, power-hungry, and criminally insane, but you may be wondering how this makes her worse than Crocker.
Someday, I'll be able to make the whole world miserable.
The difference is that Crocker usually gets his comeuppance, either by getting a beatdown or being locked up in a facility. Vicky gets away with being evil all the time. She's still able to torture kids, and she has covertly taken over a lot of the town, as shown whenever she blackmails the mayor and when she tries to use magic to become dictator of the world and apparently succeeds. Until the end of that episode, no one seems to bat an eye to her actions, and even then, Timmy undoes that timeline so he can keep his fairies. As Chip Skylark so eloquently sang, she truly is Icky with a V.
I hate music.
But what do you think? Let us know in the comments if you agree with our ranking, and tell us which series you'd like to see next. Be sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss new episodes of Good to Evil featuring your favorite cartoons and video games. But most importantly, stay wicked.